Welcome back, everybody. It is Wins Above Fantasy, episode 144. Today is Thursday, June 20th. I believe I said that last week as well, Steve, but I think we might have jumped ahead in the rundown. We got a great show, guys. We are talking part two of last week, where we were looking at hitters to target and talking kind of trade season, buy low, buy high, things of that nature. This week, we are flipping over to the pitcher side of that discussion. It's going to be a fantastic time. Thank you guys for joining us. If you're not, you guys can follow us on the live stream Wednesday nights at Wins Above Pod on Twitter. And us personally, I'm at Van_verified. Steve is at Stav8818. But Steve, Juneteenth, it was, we both had the day off. It was nice to kick back a little bit. And it was also nice to fittingly remember Willie Mays, who I had to throw in at the top of the rundown as a quick note, Steve, because my dad and my grandpa took us out, my brother and I, to Cooperstown about 15, 20 years ago. And my dad's no longer with us. So I remember that trip so fondly. And Willie Mays was far and away one of our favorite exhibitions at Cooperstown, and just hearing about the catch. I put a link out there, but there's a fantastic Foolish Baseball YouTube video that kind of breaks down how impressive the catch is. What I remembered from Cooperstown is someone talking about how it wasn't just the catch, it was also the throw, turning around, stopping on a dime, turning around, holding the runner at second in a World Series game. So rest in peace to Willie Mays, a guy that is great for the sport. It is personally been a cool thing. My brother's lifelong fantasy team name is the Say Hey Kid, and great for African Americans in the game. When you look back to Hank Aaron and Jackie and Mays and Aaron, like, man, that would have been such a time to be alive watching baseball. So had to give it a shout. We'll be talking guys and pitchers rest of the show, but wanted to lead off, say RIP to a legend. And Steve, great to see you. Great to be talking baseball, man.
I'm glad you did that and threw that on the rundown and gave that little anecdote there. That's a nice touch, a nice start, and it's just crazy and fitting, just with the Rickwood Fields games coming up and the timing of that. Like, there was talk earlier in the year that Willie Mays potentially was going to be there, but obviously with everything going on with his health, it didn't become, wasn't really a possibility. And then now just the timing of his passing. And I don't necessarily have that good of a story or anecdote with Willie Mays. The reason why I am so obsessed with this game of baseball is because of my grandfather. And he just, Willie Mays was one of his favorite players. Always had, stories of watching him. He was a Dodgers fan, a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. And then when they left, became like a Yankees hater first, and then a Mets fan second. But his true love was with the Dodgers. So, he grew up, with that rivalry, and then being on that side of the New York Giants, Brooklyn Dodgers rivalry. But
Crazy.
Just the stories he had and respect he had for Willie Mays, just as a kid, hearing the stories of how good he was. And yeah, it's a great point, that Foolish Baseball videos. One of the older ones that I watched, I'll rewatch it now, given the timeliness of this. But yeah, that throw was amazing, right? In Ebbets Field, that the center field fence was what, like over 450 feet. Who knows how far it was? So to throw a strike to second base, and do that, it's almost just as impressive, if not more impressive, than the actual catch itself. So
we
nice
always
touch. Glad you mentioned it. RIP Willie Mays.
We always do in our home league, like when we're doing road trips and windshield time in the Midwest here, we'll look up old stat lines and just imagine if they were on your fantasy team. And Prime Bonds is like one that we actually were in that, vicinity, but then we'll go back before that. And I couldn't believe that Mays, it was like 54-66. He received MVP votes that entire run. And then I just thought, like, 50s is so long ago. The fact that people even, and for good reason, like, baseball holds on to tradition and history, so that it's cool. But to span 9 decades and people still know, what you did on the field is like, it's so cool. I hope there are things that we talk about in this day and age that people will be talking about in, 2120 or whatever it is. So it's like, yeah. So anyway, awesome little jump in on the history, but fast forwarding way up to 2024, Steve, we're looking at pitchers. We're looking at what's been, an interesting year for pitching in that it seems like everyone has pitching that they didn't expect. They all have found money when it comes to, the deep shots that you're hoping after pick 180 in the draft room that you get one right. And it seems like people get two or three right this season. That said, we are looking similar to the exercise we did last week in a way at underperformers. And the hitter one, we were talking before we started the show, the hitter list last week was just, wrought with gems and buy lows and people we were excited about. When we ran K minus BB up until this point for the season, and then looked at projections for K minus BB moving forward, it threw out some interesting names, but maybe not names that we were in a hurry to endorse and say, this is absolutely a buy low. So I think at least the first portion of tonight's show is going to be kind of assessing some of these strugglers, figuring out if they're buy lows. We also have some buy highs, and we got some names that should be available in a lot of leagues near the end of the show. So looking forward to it. It's kind of a mixed bag in terms of process on how we got here compared to, the Steve just spreads sheet that I tried to explain earlier, but it's kind of a tongue twister. So, Steve, talk about kind of the approach here. If you want to add anything, any context to the show topic before we get into some of these buy lows.
Yeah, at least the buy lows, more so than the hitters, and maybe just because it's tougher to look at pitcher lines that have been struggling for essentially what 35 to 40-ish% of the season we're kind of at right now.
Yeah.
You kind of have to hold your nose a little bit more. And it's tough, especially like a guy that we'll talk about right out of the gate. Just a guy that is doing things well and you believe in, has a track record, has a good underlying process, yet continues to not get the results for a pitcher because they come in such large, right? If a hitter's in a slump, like, okay, they're 0 for 4, you move on. If you have another guy in your lineup, it's not even, you don't even think about it too much.
Right.
When a pitcher gets rocked, if you're in a head-to-head weekly league, like you live with that. If it's just one start, if they cost you the ratios, it's extremely frustrating. And I understand wanting to give up on those guys, not wanting to trade for them. It's much harder to live with that or talk yourself into buying a guy that has a 5 ERA that's continually giving up home runs despite what, like,
No, that's
Gray
such a good
Gray at Rasball always
yeah.
talks about it like in his rundowns, like, too bad I don't play any XFIP leagues, right? Like it's hard to
Right.
it's hard to stomach that when the results are just so bad, but sometimes that's what you have to do. And I think it leads to some opportunities. Like this list is tough. The at least the first process that we did, it's a tough list.
It is, and
but
that's what I was gonna hit on. It's like, projection models are supposed to be updating in real time, but then you look at some of these guys and it's kind of like you almost want to like shake the magic 8 ball again, and you're like, are you sure you think that they're gonna be that good the rest of the way? Like, again, anecdotal, but I kind of feel like it's much more likely and much more common for hitters to have that slow month or two. Whereas pitchers, it seems like if you're at this point and you're really having a rough year, whether it's, there's some guys on the good side of this list where it's like they're one season removed from having one of those years where you're like, you know what, it's not their year. But for hitters, it's like, oh yeah, Schwarber starts slow. He's cold in April, and then he heats up in May and June. It seems like, I don't know if it's because of the frequency of their, performances where they're literally going up to the dish 4 times a night as opposed to one outing in a week. But it definitely seems like it's harder to catch lightning in a bottle for like a slow starting pitcher that you're just like, oh, they're going to turn it around. It's not impossible. And there are names that we'll get to that have already done that this season. But yeah, just I don't know. The vibe seems different than last week's. Where last week we were like buy low, buy low, buy low, and then these ones it's like I don't know.
It's the shape of the season, right? Like for hitters, there's like an old anecdote or cliche that you have one really good month, one really bad month, and then two really in between, or three in between, whatever. Just average months, and that's kind of a rule of thumb for hitters. And you also could see it like progressively with hitters, because it is just 4 to 5 at bats a night, right? Like if a guy's hot, like they make up for their stat line over like a 2 to 4 week period. If guy's really cold, like it happens gradually. With pitchers, especially if it's consistent, like it just blow up after blow up after blow up, and they can't, if you have a bad outing, they can't correct that until 5 days later, in the most case. So it's hard to say, okay, I'm going to trade for this guy, and then you do it and it looks like a great buy low, and then it's another bad start. Like if you trade for a hitter and they go for 4 the next night, it's like, okay, well, takes a little bit of time. For pitchers, it's hard to have that patience, but I think it might be prudent to practice it.
Well, let's get in, because we've got a handful of names as always, and we've got a few segments here. And our 3 segments, we're splitting the show up, are, to quote the CBS guys, that I enjoy listening to them over there. Buy low or heck no is segment 1. Segment 2 is the buy highs, and then the segment 3 is buy for cheap. That will just kind of round out the show with ones that are almost available even in like NFBC leagues. So to start with the first one, Steve, again, we ran that spreadsheet where it was K minus BB to date, and then looked at their projected K minus BB. And then you sorted and ran kind of the conditional formatting to show a little bit of process stats, but basically who looks like they have the biggest turnaround coming up compared to where they are right now. So that was some of these, but we've also thrown in a handful of other names. And I wanted to start off, Steve, with Pablo Lopez, because this was one that got rocked again on Tuesday against the Rays, had a rough outing against the Yankees. This was one that, I mean, I'll tell you, in my home league, the guy literally messaged us all and said, door is wide open if anyone wants to trade for Pablo Lopez. And I think that's where a lot of managers are at, because they truly thought they had just an ace's ace. And
their bench, they're not even starting him. They're willing to trade him. I bet you can bet Pablo Lopez for 50 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to hear your take on it, Steve, because Lance Brozdowski, I think we're still on the honeymoon of having him on the show a few episodes ago. But his Substack, that was the leadoff, and it got my attention on concerns with Pablo Lopez, talking about his 4-seamer, kind of how he hasn't been able to locate it as well. And that, like he's doing some stuff well, but you kind of got to get your bread and butter right if you want that ERA to come down. As he mentions, until he fixes that fastball, hard time seeing how he can beat like a 4, low 4s ERA. So that's Lance. I mean, I don't think he's ruling him out, but what do you think on Pablo Lopez? Because this was, I mean, also talking Nick Pollock, it's perpetually one of Nick's favorite pitchers. He's still SP 33 on the list. And he's kind of saying it's a blind faith that, like, I get if people want to put him low, but we know Pablo Lopez is an elite pitcher. So what do we make of this?
I just think that it's sort of one that you have to hold your nose to. I think it's a great point by Lance. And I don't have it up, but I don't have a slide for it to put on the stream, but the location is definitely true with the 4-seamer. It's catching much more of the zone compared to 2023. But what I will say, at least on the locations that I'm looking at, Savant, I'm just clicking back and forth between 23 and 24, is that the location is very subtle. In 2023, the dark red, where most of those 4-seamer locations are concentrated, are at the very, very top of the zone. There's like the top line of the zone almost splits the dark red blob in half in 2023. In 2024, that four-seamer location is just slightly down. Like the top line of the zone goes through the upper third of the dark red blob. Great podcast descriptions there for you.
I like it. I like it.
But that's how subtle this location difference is for Pablo Lopez. So I understand the trepidation and I understand the frustration, and I've been talking lots of people off the ledge in the pitcher list Discord as far as pop when it comes to Pablo Lopez, um, especially M Cava. Shout out to him. He's been going through it with Pablo Lopez, so I understand it there. But it's really something that I think is, yeah, it's a little tweak in location and just some luck factors, right? Like
Mhm.
the home run, the fly ball is elevated as compared to last year. The left on base rate is um, 12 points lower than what it was last year. 3 points higher on home run, the fly ball. Everything else looks pretty much in line. Sure, the swing strike rate is down from last year, but it's still better than what it was in 2022 when he was, a 3.75 ERA pitcher in 180 innings with, a 24% strikeout rate. He's at a 26% strikeout rate. His walks are down. It's the lowest walk rate of his career. Maybe it's not throwing as many strikes and giving up a little bit, just sort of taking that Blake Snell mindset of not getting beat and giving up home runs. Like, the home run per nine is an outlier when looking at all of his numbers. He's ran home runs per nine closer to 1. It's at 1.8 this year. Like,
Wow.
based on just luck alone, like there's got to be some positive regression there for him. Sure, I don't think it's the ace that it was last year, the top 10 pitcher where, he was a top 10, top 5 pitcher for guys going into this year. I think it's more of like a top 20, top 15 the rest of the way, which is like a 3.6 ERA with, a 26% strikeout rate. Like, on a good team, like, he should get wins.
Mhm.
I think that it's subtle differences with Pablo Lopez and like location. And sure, he's hung a few changeups too. That's what got blasted for a 3-1 homer yesterday versus the Rays. So I know it's hard and I know people are super frustrated, but I right now would give you a pause on this stream to go offer and trade for Pablo Lopez. If that's what the manager said in your league, I think
Yeah,
you
I
should
mean,
absolutely do it.
so to real time it, just even looking at Nick's list, which I know we don't like to do challenge trades, but to play the hypothetical, 7 slots behind him are 2 of my pitchers, Nick Pivetta and Framber Valdez. One of them in a piece could probably get that over the line.
Yeah, I think easily.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't even think you need to give up that much.
yeah, maybe not. But yeah, I agree. The more like looking at it, like the walks are still in check, like just his overpowering extension with the velo's not down that much. Like so
No.
much of it looks similar. And like you said, even someone like Lance Brozdowski who dissects it to the level he does, it's still looking at kind of like splitting hairs. And it's something that it's different than like not having a feel for a splitter. Like if you just need to improve the location of the pitch you throw the most often, to me, that doesn't seem like an insurmountable thing to work on. And we've always liked the Twins pitching coaching. So I do have a little bit of a confidence there. And I think you're right, man. Like you called out, this is probably the best buy low there is right now because it's truly buying low. It's not buying low when they're coming off of 3 good starts that are indicate a turnaround.
This is a true buy low, and I think based on just sort of track record and a simple underlying metrics that you can get, that Pablo Lopez is a great buy.
I'm throwing in an offer after the show. It would take too long to do it in real time, but let's get to the second one, which is Jordan Montgomery, Steve. And this is one I was excited to see what could happen with the D-backs. It has not looked good. I know he's been kind of a WAF favorite over the years, but you can pretty much double his ERA and almost his WHIP this season with a 6 ERA, a 163 WHIP. The strikeouts are nowhere close to that, like, what we used to get excited about with that 24%. He was one that we always liked how the whiff rates were higher than the K rates, and we thought it would catch up. Now the whiff rates are down as well quite a bit. So Jordan Montgomery still has good projections on K minus BB. He is 7th in that list that we ran, like we were talking about, where he's projected at a 15.4% K minus BB, which is a big climb from the 12 or 8% he's at right now.
Yeah, he's got a 15.4 strikeout percentage this year, not a 15.4 K minus BB.
Yeah, so that's it's looking bleak for Montgomery, and this is one where I just don't know where you see the light at the tunnel. The Ks are down, the walks are up, the velo's down, 2 crucial ticks for a guy who was already, I don't want to say fringy, but like, a 31-year-old guy who we were still waiting on turning the corner. Is there any hope for Jordan Montgomery here? Why don't you go ahead and take a shot at that while I look up his roster percentage, because he can't be universally owned.
I'll try and shed some light and show you the light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay. 61% in Yahoo, by the way, for context.
The swing strike rate, so like the denominator in swing strike rate is pitches, so overall swings and misses per pitches thrown, whereas whiff rate is per swing. That's why whiff rate is higher. The denominator is lower. It's just out of swing. Swing strike is over out of total pitches. So the swing strike rate, that's what's on like the standard Fangraphs leaderboard. When you look at Savant, you see whiff rates. So just a little caveat there and just reminder, because I know it can be confusing sometimes. But the swing strike rate last year was 11.4%. This year it's 11.3%. So getting the same amount of whiffs overall. Yeah, the CSW is down a little bit, but that's due to called strikes. Yes, the velo down a tick and a half is concerning, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this guy signed late, didn't have a spring training. I think that, like, look at what's happening with Snell and the injuries. Like, I do not want to touch pitchers that sign late. Hitters, sure, I'll be okay with that. Pitchers that sign late, I think they need a proper spring training.
Wasn't that Rodon last year as well?
Or I don't think Rodon signed late with the Yankees last year. I don't think so. But yeah, I think that's a big deal, and I think that has a lot to do with the velocity. A lot of the other luck, quote unquote, air quote, luck factors are pretty unfortunate for Jordan Montgomery. It's just a 65% left on base percentage. He's like a ground ball guy too, so that's career is 74% for him. So basically 10% off his career as far as guys that are actually left on base. It's a 348 BABIP allowed. He's been at 295 for his career. There is a lot of concern with the strikeouts down from a guy that didn't get that many strikeouts, right? Like in his really good years, he had a 24% strikeout rate. In his last 2 years, where he was probably at the best surface numbers of his career, it was just a 21% strikeout rate. So anytime that dips and the walk rate goes up with it, yeah, there definitely is some concern. But I think that has a lot to do with the fact that he got this late start and isn't fully up to speed. It's been only 57 innings. Like I would be like, Montgomery's not an ace. Like he's had mid-3s ERAs in his best years. Like he's had stretches like this. I just think he is going to be a lot more like himself going forward, which is probably like a high 3s ERA with a 20% strikeout rate, and a guy that maybe you could add for free or get if you trade a pitcher, right? Like I don't like that's a way that I like to buy low. I think I've talked about this on trade shows. Like get Montgomery back as if you're giving up a pitcher for a bat, like a pitcher and a hitter to upgrade a bat. Ask for Montgomery as the return back because more
than a throw in.
Exactly. It's not someone that is going to hold up a trade, a framework, right? It's someone that you need to replace those innings if you're trading pitching for hitting, and I think Montgomery is a guy that is probably acquirable in those situations.
Yeah, that's a good sell, Steve. I'm looking at him differently already. He does have the Phillies on Saturday, which will be
Yeah,
a
so maybe wait
daunting
till
task. But
after that. Yeah.
after that comes the Athletics. So that's your silver lining. And if he looks good against the Phillies, which is a big if, given what he's done, then I think it's probably rushed to add just for the stream factor, if he's available, and probably anything deeper than like 12 teams would be my guess. But yeah, otherwise, like you said, possibly like a throw-in trade target. Let's move to another guy whose velo's down a little bit, and that's Jesus Luzardo, which was one that we kind of expected would have some regression from that outstanding 200 strikeout year last year, but his draft price was always slipping and falling. So I have some shares, Steve, not because I targeted him, but because he was one of the guys that it would 2-3 rounds later.
Yeah, he fell
Why not?
in the situation and was at the end of a tier that you wanted. Like he was in that range that we like to target pitchers, right?
Yes.
Like that pick 100 range where we hit our first
Exactly.
pitcher.
Right. It's like, yeah. So you would get him 30 picks after his ADP and say, okay, let's get some Ks. Well, it hasn't really gone that way so far with just a 21% K rate, which is very low for Luzardo, and an 8% walk rate as well. The fact that he's under a strikeout per inning is just, again, nuts after a year where he was 200 plus. So now we've got to look at Luzardo and kind of assess. I know Nick is not high on him. But I think talking about game logs, we bring this up a lot. He did give up 9 runs, which they all count, but 9 runs in one game against the Rays. So that's probably factoring into the 5 ERA and a 125 whip. I mean, obviously it's factoring in, but it's really buoying it up. My issue, Steve, is even if you give him a free pass for that game, the strikeouts are going the wrong direction, which is, kind of what you're expecting out of Luzardo. And the velocity, like I mentioned, not only was it down a couple miles per hour on the season, but Fish on First on Twitter at Fish on First just noted he topped 94 in terms of like his max was 94 on velocity, and he's averaged 95 leading up to this point. There was also elbow tightness recently. So question becomes, if Luzardo, who clearly is underperforming and could be a buy low, do we endorse it, or are you kind of running the other way from this one?
I'm kind of out on this one. I think there is an injury that he's dealing with. There was a note that he was pulled at just 77 pitches in his last start. He wasn't even doing that bad. I think he gave up 2 runs in 5 innings. Only had 2 strikeouts. Like you said, the velocity was down. He didn't have his best steps. So I'm wondering if an IL stint is coming. And that being said, like sometimes these guys are going through things and do need to get right, and they come back and if it's not anything with the arm, if it is the back, like the report said that he pitched through a stiff back on Sunday, and he gets that right after a stint. I think it's a good opportunity because I think that Luzardo could be dropped in like shallower leagues, like he's on the wire in my 10-team league. So I think that it's a buy low. If this actually, like, I don't want him to be hurt, but if that's the explanation and that's what the diminished velocity, diminished Ks are, there's still a good pitcher in here. And that would explain, some of the issues that he's dealing with. And you lived with some of the warts of Pablo Lopez. Like, I don't think he was ever going to be like a 2 ERA guy, even in like his best years. Like, it's more of like a low 3s. But when he was striking out 30 and 28% of the guys, it didn't matter. And that's why he was drafted as sort of a SP1A sort of guy.
Yeah, Luzardo, right?
Not,
yeah, you mentioned Pablo Lopez, which
Luzardo. Sorry, excuse me. That's why you draft Luzardo as an SP1 because of those Ks. or 1A, right? And when he's not giving you that, it could come apart pretty quickly. So I'm almost hoping that it is something with this back, and that explains the velocity and the lack of Ks, because I think that I'm always interested in the guy that potentially could strike out 30% of the guys, and I think that he faces, and I think Luzardo still could possibly do that.
Yep. Last year was a 28% strikeout rate. As my cat jumps over my entire podcast setup right here and has plummeted down to 21%, like we said.
Yeah.
So that's Jesus Luzardo. We got a few more that we'll kind of get through quickly. And then we got some fun buy highs to talk about, but we got to take our first ad break and we'll be right back after this. Okay. So Steve, next one, again, I kind of teased it, Framber Valdez. It's just kind of been meh. The 391 ERA, 121 whip. The ground ball rate is sky high, which is kind of vintage Framber, but it's also come at the expense of any of the strikeout gains that he had kind of been going down a good path on in recent years. This is the lowest strikeout rate we've seen for him. I think that he's in the majors, 56 strikeouts in 73 innings. Just took kind of a little bit of a tough luck loss against the White Sox, but you hope for Framber to dominate a team like the White Sox. The fastball velo, another one that's down 2 ticks from 95 to 93 this season. So that one is concerning.
I'm looking at 96 on Savant, at least.
Oh.
It looks like the best fastball velocity of his career. Sorry to interrupt.
That's on this year.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm off on that. Savant 2024. Yeah, I've got 93.6 for
interesting. It's probably mixing sinkers and
that's I think what it is.
Yeah.
Versus you're saying
versus probably just the 4-seam. Yeah.
Well, what are we looking at here, Steve? Because even 4-seamer, I've got 94 down from 95.7 last year. Yeah, that could be something lost in the data here.
I'm not sure. Yeah, interesting though. But hey, that is something to keep in mind. And he's only thrown 21 4-seamers this year. I don't know where. It's pitch info versus whatever Savant uses for their pitch tracking data, like the Hawkeye data. So it could just be a difference. But I've never really seen a 2-mile-an-hour difference.
Yeah, big difference
in that. But
keep
on going. Sorry.
No, I was just trying to look and see on Twitter what if we got anything to validate it. But point being, Framber is not the SP1 that you definitely signed up for with him. Now the question becomes, do we feel that this one's a buy low? And just to hit on the next one, we'll kind of lump in because you were talking injury with Luzardo. Joe Musgrove is one that came in very high on this list. He's had elbow inflammation. He's slated to throw this week and is projected to return sometime after All-Star break. So that's kind of an interesting stash as well. Just penny for your thoughts on both of these guys, Framber and Musgrove, if there's anything actionable.
I have never had any shares of Framber, I don't think. And I don't think that I would want one now. I never really liked him because he never really struck that many guys out. And now it's even lower at the 18%. Sure, the ground ball rate is amazing, back to over 60%. Whereas last year he got into some trouble because it dipped down. It was probably still, elite as far as relative to the league at 54%. It's back up to 62%. So you could live with that. It's just the lack of swing and miss for me is just prone to starts where he gets singled out, like Nick Pollock likes to say, or so relying on BABIP. And sure, a lot of this contact is weak, and this is a skill. It is a skill to have this, but just with that strikeout rate, I think there's even less room for error. And the fact that he has an ERA below 4 right now, I think it's it's a little fortunate. Sure, the Sierra FIP and XFIP are in line, but I just don't like this type of pitcher. Never really will, and I don't find any reason as to see why that K rate would pick back up to the 25%. Like it was almost even more. It's interesting, right? Like his ground ball rate and strikeout rate are almost inverse, right? Like he did have that amazing year in 2022 where he had a 282 ERA, where he had a 24% K rate and the 76% ground ball rate, just absolutely insane.
Mhm.
But other years where he's had that extremely high ground ball rate, like he does this year, um, the K rate has been lacking, and it's lacking even further this year. I
Right.
just don't love it.
Ye
Walks are even up too as compared to last year.
Mhm. Yep, it's one of those where I don't know that there's anything you can do if you're the manager. The thing you do if you're not the manager is you move on, and that's Musgrove is the next one on the list, Steve. This is one that, again, there's not much to point to that's that exciting, but I do think it's a little interesting that for a guy who's just 4 or 5 weeks away, that typically is kind of a game changing pitcher, is available in even industry leagues as a stash. Any interest on your side for Joe Musgrove, who's got a 5.66 ERA and a 1.48 WHIP? Scary stuff with the elbow, but again, at his best, this is a guy that has a sub 6 walk rate and a strikeout rate around 25%.
Yeah, it's come down to health for me. And I think last year he did start to complain about um the elbow too. And it just really hasn't been right since. But like when Musgrove is healthy, like there's a really good pitcher in there. And if he does come back and the velo ticks back up to like 93, um, and it really is something that he's just like truly over, I could definitely be interested in Joe Musgrove again. Um, it just really comes down to health for me because he clearly did not look like um the same pitcher basically from the midpoint on of last year. And it's kind of like a writing on the wall sort of thing. Like he had 180 innings back to back years in 21, 22, then 97 last year, just 50 this year.
Mm-hmm.
It just looks like it's almost inevitable for him. I don't even want to say it to put it out there, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It just if he's healthy, I'm interested. If not, I think that yeah, like stash him on your IL if you have the space because maybe he gets out of his healthy and then it's a free drop. I wouldn't be able to advocate trading for him though or anything like that just because of how scary it could be with an elbow injury like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did say in May that it was like a precautionary thing, and that
Yeah.
that it wasn't the that which must not be named was not even on the table. But I
Yeah,
guess that's kind of media speak and press speak. So it never is
exactly.
until it is. So,
Yeah.
well, let's round out with one that's pretty exciting in Bailey Ober. So we were talking about Pablo to lead off, his teammate to close here, and this is one that, contrary to Fromber on Nick's list, he's very high on Ober. He's at SP 35 overall. But Ober has struggled a little bit, and that's why I think this one is also an interesting one to truly buy low. Although he's been a little bit better lately in terms of like his most recent the recency bias, but a 4.81 ERA, a 1.19 WHIP. Um, his last start against the A's, he had 8 strikeouts and 6 1/3, only 1 earned run. But maybe the manager looks at that and says, "Hey, it was the A's. I'm going to sell high." And yeah, I think that there's plenty to like here with Ober. We liked him going into the offseason. But what are your thoughts on Bailey Ober, Steve?
Yeah, I like it. I think that there is a good opportunity here to buy low on Ober. Um, it's like the oldest trick in the book as far as like when it comes to advanced pitching analysis and looking at sabermetrics. Paul Sporer always talks about this. Like this, the first thing that we always used to do was look at the whip, the guys with low whip and high ERAs, and target them. And Bailey Ober has a good whip at like 1.19, and has an ERA above close to 5, right? So that whip does not match the ERA. Obviously, we've gotten a lot better at looking at other things as far as like ERA indicators and K minus BB. That's why we focus on it so much in this show. But the K minus BB is still pretty good. It's not as amazing as it was last year, but it's still a 24% strikeout rate and a walk rate under 7%. Yeah, when he was cooking last year, it was 25% and 5%, but that's not too far off, right? It's 1 point either direction. That sort of can correct itself in 2 starts at this point. The left on base is 10 points lower than it was last year. It's a higher BABIP. The home run, he's not getting too killed by the homer ball. He does give up a lot of fly balls, so that's always going to be a part of his game. And what makes him viable is that he doesn't walk many guys. So, yeah, when there are some more walks in his game, that sort of does lead to the issue. And he has walked at least 2 guys the last 4 out of the last 5 starts. So that's a bit concerning. And that's probably the reason why he's struggling. But before that, he hadn't walked more than the guy in 4 starts. He had a 10 strikeout, 0 walk game at Toronto back in the middle of May. So I still think there's a good pitcher in here, and basically everything is sort of the same. And that's Ober is a 3 to 4 pitcher on your team. Like there's going to be stretches like this where he is not, at his best, and that could look pretty bad. He was dropped in my 12-team league, and I added him, and I don't plan on dropping him anytime soon. I think he has Oakland again coming up. It was some tough starts there, and I understand the frustration, but
good division to pitch in for sure.
Yeah. Gonna get the White Sox a few times here, right? Like,
and head to head, that's huge. Like down the home stretch, nothing's worse than seeing you're lined up with
it's at Oakland, at Arizona, and then I'm gonna pull up the schedule here a little bit. Then it should be at Seattle potentially for Ober, which is pretty nice. So
they're hot, but you still like that matchup.
Yeah. And the games that the Pittsburgh start was tough, and that was actually when the manager dropped him after that. But before that, it was at New York versus Kansas City. Kansas City was at the end of May when they were just absolutely on fire. And then at Cleveland was another 5-run start. So, other than the Pittsburgh one, it really is kind of like excusable, honestly. And I think that he could be a 3.8 pitcher with, a 25% strikeout rate. Like that's a good back end starter. And that's sort of why I think another part of pitching analysis and understanding why these guys are buy lows is that the reason, like, other than like the aces, like these guys are going to have these stretches. Like that's what makes them different from the ace gonna ace label and even the fringe top 30 guys, right? Like Ober's probably in like the 30 to 40s. There's going to be fluctuation like this for guys like that.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned like a 3.8 pitcher. I think the other thing with Ober is usually you can rely on him as a sneaky whip asset, and that's the forgotten stat. But, last year a 107 whip, the year before a 105 whip. Again, I know the walks have been an issue lately. And that's usually a great part of his game where it's like 5% and under. But if he can kind of rectify that, he's an asset there. So that's Bailey Ober. I totally agree, Steve. And I think he's an excellent like SP 5.6. And honestly, if you're listening to Nick, he's got him as a 35 overall. So I think there's
that's another big reason why I've had faith in Ober is that Nick's never really lost it. Like he's just
when in doubt. When in doubt, Nick Nick's vote of confidence is always good when it
For
comes
sure.
to pitchers. So, well, we got buy highs next, guys, as we kind of round out the show. Stay with us because these are some good discussions, but we got to take our second ad break. We'll be right back. So, Steve, I want to pair these first two together because they're right next to each other in Mr. Pollock's list. We got Kevin Gossman and then the aforementioned Carlos Rodon. And the reason why I like pairing these together is, in a way, they're kind of flip-flopped for me on expectations going into the season versus what you've gotten. If you were to swap their stat lines, I don't think anyone would be that surprised. Whereas Kevin Gossman was the one that we were stumped in trying to analyze with a Lance Brozdowski on the show. And it's like, I wish I could tell you. But Gossman is the first one where we have to ask, is this a buy high? It's a guy who is, again, high up on that list of names that should improve from a K minus BB standpoint in terms of projections. He had a terrible April, but he's righted the ship quite a bit and with a really good May, a solid June so far, albeit a little bit disappointing still on the strikeout rate at 23%. He's a guy that, again, some of the stuff looks like he could get swing and miss stuff. The chase rate is really high. It's just the swing and miss rate, not so much. The fastball's been very hittable, which is what Nick always cites. But the splitter is really the name of the game. And if the splitter is not otherworldly, then Gossman no longer can be viewed as an ace, really, which is the hard part. That said, Nick's got him as SP29. And then you've got Carlos Rodon at SP38, but having a much different season, as are the Yankees compared to the Blue Jays. He's 9-3 with a record. Talking about chasing wins, Rodon's got plenty. A 3.28 ERA, a 1.11 WHIP. The changeup is what's really jumping off the page. Ventured over to Fangraphs and saw the stuff plus on that pitch jumped from 84 last year to 117 this year. So a lot of interesting stuff with Rodon, but at their very best, and I don't know that we can expect the very best of Rodon with all the mileage. I think Gossman still has the higher ceiling, but I'm curious where you land on this debate, especially since this is kind of AL East fodder here. So your thoughts on both of these guys?
I am stumped with both of these guys. I don't know if they're buy highs. I don't know if they're buy lows. I don't know if they're good. I don't know if they're hurt.
You're scared. You're scared to target them. Yeah, I
both
agree.
Of these guys. In a 10-team league, I just traded Kevin Gossman for Willie Adames.
So you gave up Gossman for Adames.
Yes.
Okay, so you're selling.
It's a roto league. I need it. I have
Adames has been
Crochet, Imanaga. I also have Rodon on that team.
Okay.
I got Bobby Miller coming back, Scherzer. So I had pitching.
Total
so
surplus.
For context is needed. But yeah, I don't really regret it. I mean,
and Adames is like a B, like he's a piece, but he's not like a.
I mean, he has 12 homers, 51 RBIs, hitting 240. Like the RBIs are carrying him, but it's a good offense. True. I mean, should be close to 25 to 30 homers, right? With but he also has 10 steals too. So
yeah,
Adames is having a pretty nice guy, a nice year. He's I know this isn't everything, but he's ranked 46th in that league setting, which is just a standard 5x5.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah, sure. Maybe by name brand, it was a bit of an overpay, but in context,
yep.
Yeah, I'm okay with it just because I just don't understand how Kevin Gossman has a 24% strikeout rate. When he's been since 2020 a 30% guy. Sure, even if the ERA was a little bit elevated because in certain years he gave up some more homers and is prone to that, but it's just so confusing to me considering that the velocity's down. That I think is a big part of it, and that little tweak, especially when he's a guy that gets a lot of whiffs on his splitter and fastball that plays off the splitter. Something subtle like that could be important for Gossman.
Just 1 mile
I
per
know the
hour.
result.
Yeah, right.
Just 1 mile per hour, just one tick. But for someone that lives off that, like, and his fastball is getting crushed this year, and he throws the fastball like right down the plate,
Right. It's
50% of
something
the
to point
time.
to. Yeah.
Like the four seamer whiff percentage is the same. It's 17.5 this year and 17.2. And again, now we're talking about whiffs, so whiffs per swing. But the put away percentage has gone from 25% down to 18%. So with
It's
two
not
strikes, he
fooling.
is
It's not
not
fooling
getting,
anybody. Yeah.
yeah. And the split finger put away percentage, the whiff percentage is higher, is 33. Yeah, it's down a lot from 23. It was 43% whiff percentage. So almost half the time people swung at the splitter, they missed it. It's down to a third of the time now. But the put away percentage is also down 6 percentage points. So he is just not getting whiffs in two strike counts, and that's leading to the low K rate, and that's what made me love Gossman. That's what made you love when you were all over him when he was sort of like, do we buy Gossman as a top 10 pitcher? You're like, yes, we do, and you were right, but that's not there anymore. So I am concerned and kind of out on Gossman going forward.
Yeah, it's tough.
I almost think it's a
on
sell high. It's a 3.2 ERA right now
for Gossman. 408,
yeah.
right? 408 ERA.
Let's see. Oh, sorry. I was looking at Rodon. Yes, 408.
Yeah. So I mean, he's struggling. What I was going to say about Gossman is PLV certainly loves him, and PLV loved him the year that his hit luck was like far and away the most favorable, and that was part of the reason I liked him as a bounce backer. His draft price, and it's still like he's the 30th best pitcher by PLV, and his PLA, which is like basically the ERA of PLV is 2.76. So also very, very good compared to the 408. I wanted to just look because the whole thing is a splitter. I wanted to look at this pitch in particular and see that. Okay, so the swing strike rate is at 18% versus 22.1%. So still good, but for splitters, that's just 56th percentile because splitters usually are such good swinging strike pitches. Trying to see like other stuff. I want to go to like locations. So for this, I'm just looking to see if there's anything drastically different. It looks like kind of his low lock, which is where he goes with it, is still the same as what it was. It's not like he's leaving it over the middle a lot more. He's actually leaving it over the middle less. So I just don't know what's so different about the splitter that it's not dominating the way that it used to offset anything with the four seamer. Just real quick on the four seamer, because that pitch gets crushed. That one, you want well, in general, he doesn't locate it high very well. And then on midlock, I mean, it's like what we've been saying. Like, I guess he's hitting the zone 6% more with his fastball than last year. So maybe it's just been a little too hittable. But when you look at so many of these numbers and charts and everything, it looks so similar to last year that it's just like, how could the results be this different? And the indicators don't look like they should be this different. So I don't know that I'm as out as you are on Gossman, to be honest. I don't know that I'm running to target him, but I think he's a decent buy, I guess buy high, high in terms of the price tag, but at a 4 ERA, you're probably getting him at like 70 cents on the dollar. So I'm interested in that one. Rodon, I'm scared of.
He's real
Steve.
quick on the splitter.
Yeah,
He's throwing it a mile an hour slower, and
True.
it has an inch less of drop versus last year. So the shape is a little different.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I just can't. I can't really get into it. I'm just like what makes
I'm
Kevin Gossman great isn't there for me.
I view it a little bit more like the Pablo Lopez, that I think like what is
That's fair.
different
Yeah.
is so close that I'm like, is it
Mhm.
that far from it clicking into place? But yeah, that'll be an interesting one.
I
We
wish
don't
we were in a
always.
trade. I wish we were in a trade league
I
together.
know
We
it
got
would
we got to
be.
rectify that. Yeah.
I know it would be nice. Okay, well, anything to add on Rodon, Steve? I don't know if like I'm endorsing it as like, obviously you're happy if you have him, but I'm not. Just from the health, the K's being lower than when Rodon's at his best. Um, I think he's solid, but I don't know that I'm like targeting him as like the ultimate buy high here for what he's doing.
I like that he's throwing the changeup more. Throwing the
Yeah,
fastball less.
that's true.
The changeup has a 54% whiff percentage, a 25% put away percentage. So that's always a good thing. He does only throw it 9% of the time, but
So he could throw it even more. Yeah, that's the
yeah,
path.
yeah. He throws it mostly. He throws it only to righties. So it's something that he does to combat the platoon advantage. But you face more righties, so maybe that is something that he does. He does still throw his slider to righties too, which is a good pitch in its own right. But the fastball is just getting crushed. It's only has a 229 batting average, but the 269 xBA. The X slug is on it is 534. The actual slug is 434. So there's definitely some luck involved here, and that's kind of why I'm also pretty much out
For these reasons.
yeah, for those reasons too. Yeah, the ground ball percentage up. It's a high left on base, a low BABIP. I think he's just getting fortunate. It's the lowest swing. It's a better swing strike than last year, but it's still not the 14 and 15% that we saw in 2021 and 2022 when he was like a Cy Young candidate and struck out 33% of the guys. Like, I think Gossman and Rodon are more middle of the rotation guys in my opinion, which is
Yeah,
fine if you need those, but I would pay that price accordingly and not expect sort of a,
that's
I think
fair.
when Rodon was drafted, it's like, yeah, I like Rodon at this price because like you could talk yourself into it being like a Chris Sale situation almost, right? Like Chris Sale
Mm-hmm.
took off and became an ace again. Rodon, yeah, maybe you could do that. He took off and became a Toby almost.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I agree. I think you could probably view Gossman. I would view Gossman as like SP 2-3 and Rodon as like SP 3-4
3-4.
range.
Sure,
Yep.
that's fair.
Let me quick, Steve, because I know we're running a little bit long, but these next two guys, Ronaldo Lopez and Hunter Brown, two that are kind of surging on the scene in different ways. Ronaldo Lopez all season. I mean, he was kind of an industry darling near the end of draft rooms. I believe we both got some shares. I definitely do. And it's been phenomenal. Sub 2 ERA and everything. Granted, it looks like regression's on the way, but wanted to shout that for Ronaldo Lopez, who is ahead of a Carlos Rodon on the list, so very much in that like SP3 valuation. He has increased the use of his changeup recently. It looks like that is also unlocking the fastballs. And I think he was going tonight. We actually need to double check. I believe he got the win.
Yeah, he pitched today and pitched well, if I recall correctly. Yeah,
Yes.
he was less efficient. 5 innings, 7 hits, no runs, 6 Ks, 1 walk. And
Yeah, the
outdueled
one.
Tariq Skubal. But yeah, he was good again.
And another one that, as long as luck gets a little better for him, you have to imagine the wins will be there. And then Hunter Brown is the one. Lance Prestowski at the end of the show told us that like a guy he likes that, other people might not have on their radar.
Mm-hmm.
He brought up Hunter Brown, who at the time his line was miserable. And in his last 5 starts, 31 innings, 35 Ks, a 174 ERA, and a 0.84 whip. Hunter Brown is looking like the prince that was promised. The question is, are we buying this? And if we are, kind of how high do you go on Brown? Because when like this could be the breakout, and I think that it's just, obviously you're going to have to pay the premium because he's mid breakout. But if you truly believe it's the breakout, there's some room to go grab him because he's still just 73% roster in Yahoo leagues, and his overall season line is a 5 ERA. It's just looking amazing. So just want your thoughts on these two guys before we open it up at the end, Steve, for some throw-in names.
Yeah, I like both of these guys. The only thing that concerns me with Reynaldo Lopez is a potential innings limit. He hasn't thrown more than 66 innings since 2019, when he did throw 185 or 184. So he has done it. He threw 188 in 2018, 184 in 2019. They were not good years. It was kind of like when we were hoping that he broke out to what he is today. Then he shifted to the bullpen. He threw 66 innings last year. He's at 69 already this year. Honestly, I think I'm less concerned about it. Like, Atlanta is a good team. They're going for it. He's done it before. Like, he's a veteran. He's 30 years old. Like, they have him on a 3-year, $10 million AAV deal. It's not
more worried about like Luis Heel with the Yankees on an innings limit.
Even Luis Heel. Like, I was actually in a trade negotiation trying to send him the other way. Like, the Yankees, like they've done this with Clark Schmidt in the past before. They've gone above, like, sort of well above, even like Michael King last year. They stretched him out towards the end of the year to an area that he never has really been to. Sure, there was going to be some manipulation with Lopez, and I'm sure with Heel, and I'm sure Lopez too. But I don't think it's going to be anything more than like sort of an extended stay down at the skip your start and the beginning and end of the All-Star break. Like, right. Yep. Like, make that sort of like you can make that like a 3-week absence sort of thing, 2-week absence where you have one start at the end of each of them and get an extended break there. Go 5 innings like Reynaldo Lopez did and Heel did in their last start. So I'm not as concerned about like hard innings caps. And the Yankees too have a philosophy. It's like, I know their pitching coaches talked about it. Like, if you're feeling well, you're going to pitch. Like, it's not about a hard number. It's not like, okay, we hit 120, like, you're done. It's like, okay, if you aren't feeling well, you're not going to pitch for right now. If you are, like, we're going to continue to do it. Which I think is a smarter way to approach it. But yeah, I like both of these guys. I believe both of them. Hunter Brown too, especially. I wish I added him more when Lance sort of told us to. But with all those tweaks that he made, changing on the rubber, changing his pitch mix, he basically threw the kitchen sink as far as changing, and it looks like it stuck. And I think there's even more positive progression. Like, it's a really good K- BB. Even factoring in like he was walking the world in the beginning, and all the ERA indicators, Sierra's at 3.70. The rest of it for Hunter Brown. So I like it a lot, and think that there's a good pitcher there. And props to those if you stuck it out, bought low, or added Hunter Brown back.
Yeah, absolutely. Last one I just want to throw in, Steve, and then if you want to hit on any other names, but for all the bashing I do of the Cardinals pitching and the organization for not doubling down, they're starting to get the most out of this motley crew. And Miles Michaelis is one that just 30% rostered in Yahoo leagues, 5 straight quality starts. You're never getting the strikeouts there, and it's below a K per inning, but a 2.59 ERA and a 0.73 WHIP. This was another one that Lance Brzdowski kind of profiled, that the sinker has been dropping 3 inches more. The X slug on his pitch on the sinker was around 500 and is now dropped to 150 during this time. So Michaelis is making tweaks to where he's probably the good version of that, like
That's
Kyle
yeah.
Hendricks or
He's
Fromber. Yeah.
2022. He's the good version of himself. He's 2022 Miles Michaelis, not 2023.
Yes, that's the way to put it. So he's one that I think is definitely serviceable as a back end rotation,
Absolutely.
especially if if the environment continues to bounce back toward offense. Michaelis is one that has proven he can kind of like navigate through those waters and be like a glue piece, SP6-7. So probably a little under roster right now, but not sure, Steve, if you wanted to add any final throw-ins here before we wrap up.
No, I agree. I think that's a great call with Michaelis. I think it's a classic, 6 innings, 3 runs, like over, just for perpetuity.
Right. 4 Ks.
6 innings, 2 innings, 6 innings, 2 runs, like should get wins. Cardinals are winning a bit more these days. Goes innings eater. Innings eater that's not going to kill your ratios is sort of what he is. He is like a great guy to have at the back of your rotation in 15 teamers. And there was some room, I think, in NFBC when I looked there earlier when we were talking pre-show for Michaelis. I think it was only like 90% rostered in TGFBI, like a 15-team league. Like they may be out there even in your 12 teamers and in a weekly league, deep leagues like that with lots of rosters. He's probably worth an ad there. Yeah, it's not going to be sexy, but it looks like the K-minus BB is like almost exactly the same as what it was in 2022. Yeah, it's one BIP, 0.1% off versus 2022 year where he was good. He had the 202 innings of a 3.29 ERA. The last year wasn't good. It was 201 innings of a 4.78. I think you're going to get 200 innings of a 4-ish ERA.
Yep.
Which isn't great, but is going to be probably help you the rest of the way more than it'll hurt you.
Yeah.
There was some bad starts in the beginning that elevated that ERA. It's at 4.59 right now. But
just
I
encouraging.
Like
I think it's encouraging that it's not that like complete carousel of are we going to get a good line or a bad line? Like we're starting to see a trend of results that matches up with the process.
He hasn't given up more than 3 earned runs since May the 5th.
There you go. So 6 weeks running, and he's got the
Giants. That was a stretch of having 5, 5, 2, 3, 6 from April 14th to May 7th. So a really bad stretch of 5 starts. He also was rocked at the Dodgers on opening day, but I doubt anyone really started him there. So yeah, I think you could expect like the innings eaters, 5 strikeouts, 1 to 3 earned runs, 7 inning Michaelis the rest of the way.
Yep, and I think he's pitching against the Giants at Rickwood Field.
Oh, cool.
So that'll be a cool one to watch. So yeah, there you go. That's that could be a stream one as well. So that rounds us out, Steve. I think this is great list of names. I mean, going through the rundown here, I feel like there's some that we kind of removed as in terms of like a Luzardo, Fromber.
Yeah.
There's some that are even addable.
We're torn like on Rodon and Gausman, right?
Yeah, split on Rodon and Gausman. We like Pablo, even though it's a little bit of a leap of faith. There's some potentially addable ones between Michaelis, Montgomery, even Musgrove and Ober in certain shallower leagues.
Yeah.
And then if Raylo, Hunter Brown, you could easily throw Luis Heel in there, but good luck getting him. Those are some ones that, I think even if Lopez comes back a little bit is another thing too, just to kind of close that thought, because everything looks so good for Lopez right now. But like, even when the regression of the homer to fly ball rate and the BABIP and everything comes back, he still looks like a really good pitcher, just probably isn't a sub-2 guy. So would even maybe consider sending those types of trade offers after it looks a little bit rougher for
Ronaldo Lopez you're talking, right?
Yes. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, that That runs us out. Thank you guys for tuning in as always. And if you're listening on the podcast, feel free to join us on Wednesday nights when we do the live stream. A lot of fun. Steve usually has some charts and visuals lined up, and yeah, you get to see us in the confines and jump in the chat room and all that good stuff. So you guys can find that on our Twitter at Wins Above Pod. I am at Van_verified. Steve is at Stav8818. Hope you guys enjoy the mid-June baseball here. Get your all-star votes in. It's high time for baseball, and it is yet to be the dog days. We're still kind of in it on the ascent. So with that said,
it's felt like it here. It's been like in the 90s the last few days on the East Coast here in Jersey. So
it's feeling dog days.
definitely
I
hear
agree.
that. Yeah.
I agree. But yeah, baseball wise, we still got a ways to go. So we'll be here every week the rest of the season. But until then, thank you guys for talking baseball with us.
Thanks for listening, guys. Later.